Hi friends, hope you are doing well. I'm Dr. Ganguly. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about the fourth year of the PhD, and this is my series assuming that you are in a 5-year PhD program. So if you are somebody in a 3-year PhD program, then you need to scale this problem. So essentially in the previous 3 videos for the first, second and third year of the PhD, I discussed different aspects such as doing your coursework, giving the qualifier exam, comprehensive exam, and also starting your research problem, doing a literature review, finding a research gap, and hopefully trying to get to write some of your research work after doing the research, especially in the third year. So by now you should have acquired some momentum in your research, and what you will start realizing that there are actually gaps in your research gap. So this is something to keep in mind. So what happens here is that you are going to find that there are effects of uncertainty and noise in various things which you have done. So maybe you have done some simulation, but you have not accounted for certain variables, you have not accounted for noise or variation being present in certain phenomena, and so on. You may find that there are weaknesses in the models you have developed or used, and some of the reviewers of your papers may have pointed out about some of these weaknesses. Maybe the model you have developed is not very accurate given the current timeline of your research. So what may happen is that some things which were okay maybe 10 years ago are no longer appropriate today. The technical field may have moved ahead much more. So what you may need to do is focus on improving your model. Similarly, you may have weaknesses in your data collection. Maybe you have not collected enough data. Maybe your sample size is not sufficiently large. Maybe your sample is not good. So you may have to redo some of these sampling exercises. If you are somebody who is doing qualitative research with questionnaires, you may find that your questionnaires did not contain certain important questions. So you need to address some of these issues. Then there is the problem about weakness in methods. And this often happens that a particular method you have chosen to solve a problem, maybe it's a statistical method, maybe it's a mathematical method, maybe you are using some kind of machine learning, for example, and you may find that there are better machine learning models out there which are being used to solve this particular problem. Maybe you were using regular neural networks and you think that you can use deep learning here. So do keep these things in mind. Then finally, there are sudden experimental needs which will come up. Maybe you have done a lot of research which is based on theory and modeling, and one of the reviewers has said that this thing needs to be verified by experiments. So you need to now think about setting up this experiment and doing it, or collaborating with somebody else who is an experimentalist and doing that experiment. So this brings to the next topic about collaboration. Maybe it is possible that you collaborate with some different professor in your department or some other professor around the world. So always keep in mind that you need to take your advisor or PhD supervisor's permission for any such collaboration. But sometimes what can happen is that you may need something which is not possible to get in your own lab, and somebody else somewhere else in some different institution may be able to actually help you very much with this work. So this often happens that an experimentalist can collaborate with a theoretician or a computational person and vice versa. So do keep things in mind that you can collaborate with other people, but also keep in mind that two different guys, PhD students or masters and PhD students, cannot actually put the same material in their respective thesis. So it's always better to collaborate with people who are either professors or maybe they are just bachelor degree student helping you out in some work and they are not putting the content into their thesis. So now the second point is about papers, and by now you would have realized that papers are the currency of academic research. So as far as academic research is concerned, people will judge you by the papers you have published, the quality of the papers and the quantity of the papers. Now, as I have mentioned before, journal papers are given a lot of importance, and so you should target good journal papers at this point. But do remember that there are many fields where people often publish in conferences. For example, in some of the computer science type of fields, people publish in conferences, and these fields are very fast moving. So very often people are just happy that they have published their paper in the conference, it is archived somewhere, and they move on to the next problem. But generally in fields such as the sciences, such as the social sciences, it is standard to publish the paper in journal even after it has been published in a conference. So what happens in the conference is that you present a paper, you get a lot of feedback, you include that feedback in your revised paper, and then you can submit it to a journal. But do keep in mind that the conference has given you permission to publish this paper in a journal, and also you can state in the cover letter and in the paper somewhere in the reference section that this is a revised version of the conference paper which you have published earlier. Now, one of the important things about publishing papers is that you are going to get a lot of feedback from the referees, and this feedback often helps you to improve your research. So one of my suggestions is that try to write and submit papers while you are still doing the PhD. Now, there is the old school approach that you do your entire research and then you start to write your paper at the end of the 5th year. But what happens in this case is that you do not get feedback from anybody other than your PhD supervisor and maybe your PhD committee members. However, if you are somebody who has written a couple of papers during their PhD itself, you would have got feedback from eminent experts around the world. Now, this may even be a case that your paper has been rejected, but even the rejection involves feedback about what are the various lacunas in your work, and it's better idea to get a rejection in paper than to get rejection in the thesis later on. So again, take all these rejections positively. Think about how you can fill in the different research gaps in your research gap. Now, the third thing you need to think about is the future plans. And future plans at this point would start with what are you going to do after the PhD? Are you inclined to go for postdoc, for academic position, for industry position, for startup, for national lab, and so on? So various things which you want to do will actually determine the course of your action here. Now, whatever be your aim, you can think about getting some referees for your proposals and so on later, especially if you are going for postdoctoral research or university positions or research labs. You are going to have to furnish the names of 3 to 5 referees who will judge your work. This may even be required for you in your PhD thesis submission. So again, whenever you read a paper, whenever you peruse some conference and so on, make sure that what you do is that you get the names, addresses, and emails of some professors who can be prospective referees for your work later. So this is going to be very handy for you. Also, if there are some professors who are visiting your department or lab or university, make sure you go to their presentation and figure out who they are, maybe talk to them and get some idea about where they work, what they work, and so on. So I'm talking here of professors from other universities and sometimes even different countries who may visit your institution. So it often happens in some countries, such as if people are in Japan or in some European countries, that they go around the world giving various presentations and talks at different universities, and if you meet them there later, if you approach them for postdoc, they are much more amenable to you about any postdoctoral opportunity. Now, the fourth point is that you can now start thinking about your thesis, and what you should do at this point is that you should create a table of content of your thesis, and after some thinking you can discuss this with your PhD advisor, because this is going to tell your PhD advisor that you are now thinking about leaving the university. Now, many people actually do not remember when their student actually joined the program. So do keep in mind that you may be a 4th year student, but your PhD supervisor may be thinking that you are a 2nd year student. So this can happen. So it's very important to show him your table of content at the end of 4 years so that they know that you are on the path of graduation. And at this point, they may actually make some correction to your table of content. Maybe they may add one more chapter on experiments you need to do, or one more chapter on some results you need to get, and so on. But it's a good idea to get all that laid out right now rather than be surprised much later. Also, you should try to write down your introduction chapter at this point, because what I have seen from my experience that the introduction chapter actually takes the most time for a PhD thesis, and this is the chapter where most of the learning of the student take place, And actually the reviewers and the PhD advisor also gets to learn a lot from the student by reading the introduction chapter. So do write this chapter very well and spend a lot of time in writing this chapter. And while you're writing this chapter, look at the different references and see who among these references are going to be prospective referees for you down the road, either if you are applying for postdoc or even if you are going to submit journal papers down the road. These are the names you need to give in the referee section. Finally, the fifth point again I would say about mental health issues is that do remember that the PhD is somewhat of a lonely affair and it involves a lot of negative feedback. Therefore, make sure that you have some hobbies, you have some activities you do beside your research work. This could be going to the gym, taking part in sports, it could be yoga, meditation, anything like that. So it's very important to take care of your mental health and also start thinking about philosophy. I find reading philosophy very useful, so especially the Stoic philosophy is extremely useful for PhD students. I have made a video on that, and the Stoic philosophy is certainly going to help you in coping with the stress you are going to get during the PhD program. So this was my take on the fourth year of the PhD. I hope you benefit from this video, and I will see you in a video sometime soon. See you then.